Hey, what's up guys? Spencer Rhodes here, and this is my video on whether or not Negan from the Walking Dead TV show is too over the top. So this is kind of a complicated one because in the comics, Negan works. Most people, maybe 90-95%, most people agree that Negan in the comics works. When you read his dialogue, it's funny. When you read his dialogue, you remember it in the good way, his facial expressions, the things he does. There's a lot of things about his character that's memorable in a good way. He's funny, you like his dialogue, you like his expressions, you like the things he does, you kind of like his code of ethics, even though he's kind of a bad guy, kind of a good guy, just really like just almost like the epitome of morally gray characters. He's a guy that created a system that's saved a lot of people. He had something that works. He's not really trying to kill people, he's actually trying to save people, but he really thinks that, you know, forcing people to go out and get shit for them, food and items and other stuff, not in his community, but in other communities, forcing those people as slaves to go out, risk their lives, get stuff, bring them back, or face the danger of dying. He thought that that was the way to get everything, to, you know, continue to get supplies without any of his people dying, without any of his people being at risk, with his hundreds of people being workers, being, you know, maybe soldiers, either workers or soldiers or families or normal people, but they all did something useful. They all did something that benefited his compound, his savior, the sanctuary, the main savior compound. But with other communities, he doesn't care if they get killed. He doesn't care if their lives are risked, as long as they are going out and getting supplies for them, bringing stuff for them. That's how they stay alive, that's how they continue to get fed, and that's how Negan continues to manage his community, his system, without anyone in his system dying. And if people in his system need to die, he'll kill them. He doesn't care. If people in his system do something wrong, you know, like what Dwight did, he'll burn their face with an iron. He keeps all of his people in line. He keeps his people from hurting others, from rape, from fighting each other, from killing each other, because he makes them all scared of him. He controls everyone with fear, with the bat, with the barbed wire, with his attitude, with his authority, with the things he can do, with the power that he has, with the fact that he is basically everyone's best chance at staying alive. He uses all of that to control his people. If they get out of line, they either get punished or they die. With the other communities, he doesn't care because they're not his community. And Negan has no problem killing good people because, you know, that's just the world they live in. If you read his backstory, the Here's Negan backstory, you know, he really felt bad, not just about himself, but about this whole situation, about how everyone was dying. First, he cheated on his wife, then his wife had cancer, and then he told his wife about it, the fact that he was cheating on her, and then she pretty much died, like, very quickly afterwards. And when she became a zombie, he was never able to put her down. So he has that guilt, for one thing. And then he kept meeting other survivors, and all they did was die. All they did was die. Maybe 50, 60 people that Negan kept being with early on. They just kept dying, getting bitten, turning into zombies, dying, getting attacked, dying. None of them were capable of surviving. It was the early days of the apocalypse. They had no idea what they were doing. The weak people, most of them died early on. The stronger people, they figured shit out. You know, they're the ones that are still alive. By issue 100, where we first meet Negan. And the very beginning of the apocalypse, there was mostly weak people that weren't prepared, that didn't know what they were going to do, and they all died. And Negan watched this repeat itself over and over and over again, maybe for hundreds of times. Who knows? The backstory doesn't really explicitly say how many people Negan knew that died, but it made it clear that it was a lot of people that Negan tried to survive with that died. So Negan made a choice. He grabbed a bat, he wrapped barbed wire around it, and he decided to control people. He had his little group of people, his little camp of people with Dwight and with Sherry, and he controlled them. He controlled them with fear, he controlled them with intimidation, he controlled them with everyone's desire to survive. and he controlled them. He became this person that would do anything it took to keep his group alive, but also made them scared of him. That's how he managed the system. That's how he expanded it into the sanctuary. So it's not just the fact that Negan is funny, or that he says funny stuff, or that he does funny things. His character is interesting and makes sense in the comics. In the TV show, it's a different story, because they try too hard to put comic Negan in the TV show. Alright, first I'll go with Season 6. At the end of Season 6, I do feel like maybe it was a little too soon to put Negan into the story, but fine, okay. You know, there were some problems with Jeffrey Dean Morgan being underweight, having to have a beard, you know, and those problems are still problems. We're in Season 8, and we're still dealing with the beard and him being underweight, because the damage is done. We can't really have him gain 50 pounds and be clean-shaven. I mean, we can have him be clean-shaven, and now I think he has like a 5 o'clock shadow. It might be growing back, I don't know. But, you know, that was one of the early red flags for me. Another red flag was they just tried too hard to shove his comic character into the show. His comic character, his comic attitude, personality, but worst of all, the dialogue. The dialogue in the comics, some of what Negan says in the comics, it works because it's in the comics. It works because it's written down, because a cartoon is saying it. That's one of the biggest rules about, you know, drawing literature versus filming, you know, actual filmography. Certain dialogues that work on a comic strip do not belong on a TV show. You can't just write a comic, have characters say wacky things, and then put it in a movie and expect the same result, expect the same response. It's a different format, it's a different style, it's a different way for your brain to process words and sentences. Usually in comics and cartoons and written literature, dialogue does have to be a little over the top, because you don't have the added plus of an actor, of physical people saying words, you know, so you don't have that extra thing. You don't have that extra aspect. So in the comics, or in a book, or any kind of written literature, maybe even in a cartoon, the dialogue does have to be a little bit more high up, a little bit more extreme. You know, if you have actors, actual people, physical people, in front of a camera saying stuff, you can make it more subtle. It doesn't have to be so extreme, because you can get more across with the actors that you couldn't get across when it's written on a page, because you don't have the physical people speaking with their, you know, their facial expressions and their, you know, subtlety and all of those other aspects. But with Negan in the TV show, for some fucking reason, maybe it was pressure from the fan base or fan demand, but it was a mistake. But Scott Gimple and Robert Kirkman and whoever else made this decision, they decided we're going to take Negan from the comics and do everything in our power to put him in the show as is. They wanted to take comic Negan and just have him be comic Negan in the show. Everything, the look, the face, the expressions, the action, the dialogue, every word he says. I mean, obviously he can't say the fucks, or most of the fucks, but you know, that's the only thing they try to work around. Everything else, they try to put it in the show. They tried to put it in front of the camera. They tried to have the actor say it. Every line of dialogue from the comics, everything that is Negan in the comics, they wanted it in the show. They wanted Jeffrey Dean Morgan to bring that into the show. And that was a horrible mistake, because of everything I just said. It's a different style, it's a different format. What works as dialogue written down in a cartoon, on a comic strip, in a book, does not necessarily work on a movie or a TV show or something that's being filmed with people in front of it, it's a different style. Your brain processes it differently. It has to be more extreme when it's written down. If Negan if there was no comics, if it was just a Walking Dead show and Negan was in the show, I guarantee you Negan would be less over the top. Negan would be less ridiculous. He wouldn't be saying those ridiculous things in the comics that just don't work, because he would have been created within the show. They wouldn't be trying to take something and copy it into the show and get the same result that it was in already in the other format. That's what doesn't work about Negan. It's his comic dialogue and how over the top he is. Yes, he's over the top in the comics, and he gets those extreme lines of dialogue in the comics, but it works. It doesn't work in the show. It doesn't work in the show. If you think it works in the show, fine, I'm happy for you. But I think a lot of people feel like it doesn't work in the show. A lot of people like Negan in Season 8 more because he hasn't had all those moments. He hasn't really been so over the top. He was ridiculously over the top in Season 7. Insanely over the top in Season 7. They tried so hard to shove all of his comic dialogue into Season 7, and it failed miserably. And it really wasn't Jeffrey Dean Morgan's fault. If you're going to give him all this crazy Negan comic dialogue, what can he do? He can't make it subtle because it defeats the purpose of the words that they're giving him. They're supposed to be over the top and extreme, they just don't belong in the script. It's not his fault. They got the perfect actor. They got the best actor they could. I mean, I know some people wanted John Hamm. I wanted John Hamm. You know, and maybe in some alternate reality, John Hamm is playing Negan, and he's doing a good job. But that wouldn't change the problem with the dialogue, the comic dialogue that does not belong in the show. It should not have been given to Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Jeffrey Dean Morgan should not have been put in this position where he had to do the comic dialogue justice. It didn't belong in the show. It didn't belong in the script. Some of it did. Some of it was good. The "I just slid my dick down your throat," that was a good line. It was subtle. He handled that well. But the times where he has to scream and yell, it didn't work. And maybe a little bit of blame goes to Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Maybe he's doing it wrong. But given the material he has to work with, given the lines he's given, you can't really make that subtle. You can't really make it, you know, a subtle way of talking, because it's just the words aren't meant to be said that way. I think Jeffrey Dean Morgan is doing the best he can with what he has, and I have a large amount of respect for him as an actor. I think he was a really good casting choice. Take the beard off. He's perfect. He looks like Negan. He's fantastic as Negan. I really think he's a better option than John Hamm was. You know, I just didn't know much about him before he was in The Walking Dead. I heard that he was a good actor, and I saw him in Watchmen with like a mask on, you know. I never watched Supernatural. I still haven't. They're on like season 35. Who gives a fuck? I'm never touching that show. But I have a large amount of respect for the actor, and it is not his fault. It's not his fault. It's the writer's fault. A lot of these problems in the show right now are the writer's fault. It's no one's fault but theirs. And, you know, Scott Gimple has said, Negan is a character that we just want comic Negan in the show. All of comic Negan needs to be in the show. That's our goal. He said that. He has publicly said that in an interview. That's what he publicly said. I think that was before the premiere of Season 7. He said, Negan is a character. He's perfect in the comics. He is that kind of character that you just take him from the comics and put him in the show. And I think that got a lot of fans excited because that's kind of what fans were wanting, just comic Negan in the show. But it didn't belong. It didn't work. Think about the hundreds of comic characters in The Walking Dead that have been in the show. Have any of them been brought to the show as faithfully as Negan has? No. Have any of them been as adapted word for word, panel to panel, like appearance and everything else? Everything, not just appearance, but everything. Their dialogue, their characterization. Has all of it been adapted as faithfully as Negan has? No, I can't think of any. Rick Grimes has some flaws that Rick doesn't have in the show. In the show, he has some flaws that he doesn't have in the comics. He has a shorter temper. There's a lot of differences. Michonne is vastly different. Some people think that Michonne, comic Michonne and TV Michonne are the same. Not true. In the comics, Michonne kind of has this more of this she does have this no bullshit attitude in the show, but she's more of this sort of this spunky. She kind of has an attitude. She's more impatient. She's more sexual and laid back. I mean, she has sex with like 6 or 7 characters in the comics. In the show, it's just been Rick. She's more serious in the show because she didn't flirt with anyone. Michonne likes to flirt in the comics. She didn't flirt with anyone in the show except for Rick. You know, it was just Rick. I'm trying to think of other things, but I mean, with Carl's different. Dwight's different. Jesus is different. Andrea was different. Maggie's different. Glenn was different. Abraham. Everyone. The governor. Oh, man, you know, they got some of the things like the kill them all line, him losing his eye, him attacking the prison, and some main characters getting killed. That was all in the comics, but so much of the comic governor was not in the show. So much of TV governor was just TV governor. So much of comic governor was just comic governor. That's the same with every character except for Negan. Every character except for Negan. You know, I think comic Michonne is really awesome. TV Michonne is really awesome. But they're different. The governor. People love the governor in the show. People love the governor in the comics. Not in the, like, you know, like they're a good bad guy kind of way. But they're different. They knew that all of comic governor did not belong in the show in season 3. And they made a lot of really smart changes. A lot of really smart decisions. And it allowed the governor to stand out on his own as a TV entity and not a comic entity. And I don't know why they didn't do that with Negan. They did it right with the governor, but they didn't do it with Negan. They thought, I guess because Negan was so popular, they just thought, well, let's just take comic Negan and throw him in the show and everything will work out fine. I mean, like, it might have been, like I said, fan demand, you know, fan urgency, the fans saying, you know, we want Negan, we want Negan. I mean, people are bitching about Negan in season 4. Everyone was like, oh, is this random guy in the background? Is that Negan? Oh, is that Negan's car? Oh, is that Negan's bat? Like, they were in such a rush. And, you know, I think that's a part of it. Like I said, they kind of rushed him in. Bearded, too skinny. They could have waited. They could have figured something out. They could have waited. I mean, what good did it do to shove him in? What good did it do? What good? That stupid, god-awful cliffhanger that to this day still pisses people off. That's what they got for rushing him in. That's the end result. Lesson, don't do that. Don't rush him in. Let him finish his show, then he can shave, then he can gain his weight, and then, you know, I mean, that's one thing. That doesn't necessarily fix the fact that they thought, oh, we should just bring all of his dialogue into the show and it'll work. It didn't work. Some parts of the dialogue in the comics worked and it's adapted faithfully. Most of it's not. Most of it's different. I don't know why, with this one specific character, they decided to do it all completely differently than they have been doing it and expected it to work. The whole reason that they never did that with any other character besides Negan is because they knew it wouldn't work. Negan's not that special. His dialogue is so extreme. He worked in the comics because he was in the comics. Then you try to take all of that and just put it in the show. No, it didn't work. It didn't work. But with Jeffrey Dean Morgan, I think for the most part he's done the best he could with what he has. When he's like screaming and leaning back and being so over the top all the time and being over the top and exaggerating words, it's just painful to watch. It's not funny. Most of the time Negan is on the screen, it's not funny. I don't laugh, I don't smile, I'm not enjoying myself. I'm just waiting for him to stop talking. I'm waiting for the camera to just cut to someone besides him, someone's face, besides his face. I want him to stop talking. I want him to be out of the camera. Because it's just painful to watch him scream words and exaggerate words over and over and over again. 90% of the episode, they've given him so much screen time. And, you know, I understand giving Negan screen time, but not if you're going to make him so freakishly over the top that it doesn't work at all. Just him and his, holy shit, oh, you are going to die. Like, it's not entertaining. It's not funny. I don't like it. I get nowhere near the same amount of enjoyment that I get when I read comic Negan. TV Negan is nothing like comic Negan as far as enjoyment levels. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I love Negan in issue 174, and that was last issue. That was a few weeks ago. Less than a few weeks ago. He's still great. He's been around for 75 issues now. And he's fantastic. His character, if anything, has gotten even better. He's developed. He's gotten more interesting. In the show, it's just like, oh my god, I just want the camera to stop looking at him. I want the camera to just teleport to somewhere else that doesn't have Negan in it. Because he's so over the top and dramatic and not funny. It's like a five-year-old screaming in a theater play, or a 5-year-old with a camera that's just loud and obnoxious and stupid and has no idea what they're doing. That's what watching Negan on the TV show is like. And it's not Jeffrey Dean Morgan's fault. I think the whole leaning back is kind of funny. It's kind of creative. But just the over-the-top speaking and all the comic dialogue, it's awful. Whenever Negan is over the top, and he is over the top a lot, like 90% of the time, not only 90% of the time he's talking, but 90% of the time of the episode, because that's how much they dedicate to him talking and being dramatic and being over the top. It doesn't work. I don't like it. But when he's subtle, that 10% of the time Negan is on the screen, and he's subtle, when Jeffrey Dean Morgan gets a chance to speak like a normal person and say words that normal people say, he's perfect. When he's subtle, he's perfect. When that one scene in season 8 episode 5 where they're at the table, Simon, Gavin, Eugene, Gregory, they're all at the table and Simon's talking about let's just kill the people at the hilltop, and Negan slams his bat and starts talking and talking. I mean, he yells a little bit, but he wasn't over the top. He was subtle. He was serious. I think serious helps. When he's serious, it helps, and that's, you know, comic Negan most of the time. He's usually trying to be funny and joke, and he has those moments where he's serious. So maybe it's not so much subtlety, but it's seriousness. And seriousness can be subtle. They can be the same thing. So either or. But when he's doing that, when he's being subtle, he works. He's perfect. That is Negan. You know, maybe, I don't know, maybe they should have made him less funny, or they should have given him different dialogue or different words to say, not make him so unbearably over the top, not just rip out the pages from the comics and glue it into the show. That's what they did, and it doesn't work. I think a lot of people feel this way. If you love TV show Negan, fantastic, great. But I don't, and others don't. You know, I'm not going to do a ratio, because I don't know the exact ratio. At the end of the day, I might be the only person that feels this way, but this is definitely how I feel, so I am sharing my opinions. With Negan, when he's subtle, he's perfect. When he's subtle, when he's serious, when he's scary, when he's not screaming and being boisterous and being as over the top and exaggerating as he possibly can physically be, he's perfect. When Negan is over the top, which, you know, like I said, 90% of the time he is in the show, he is borderline unwatchable. But when he's subtle, he's flawless. I just watched a part of this video the other day. It was Michael Cudlitz and Sonika Martin Green, I'm sorry if I butchered her name. You know, Abraham and Sasha, they're doing this Walker Stalker, it's like a Comic-Con type thing. It's just like a 30-second part of the whole thing, but it was attached to an article, and it was watch Michael Cudlitz do an impression of Negan. And so I click on it, and then I watch the video, and all these hundreds of people are asking Michael Cudlitz to do Negan. And so Nico's like egging him on, and Michael just goes, he's not trying to diss Negan. He's not trying to diss Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I think they respect each other. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, he did kill him in the show, but I think they respect each other. Michael Cudlitz is a very, very tasteful kind of guy. Very tasteful, very respectful. He doesn't get into drama. If he has a problem, if he has a disagreement, he usually just keeps it to himself, or he'll just kind of go around it. When Abraham died, I don't think he was happy about it. He said that every single nice, supportive thing in the public, in the interviews. I've watched all of his interviews because I love Michael Cudlitz. But I've seen all of his interviews, or most of them, and he's you know, he kind of goes around things. I don't think he really was happy with Abraham's death. I think he was disappointed, but he handled it well. He said every single positive thing he possibly could. He just went around it. He went around the fact that he was disappointed because he didn't want to diss the writers. You know, he was nice and friendly. And I think that was the thing that he was doing in regards to his impersonation of Negan. He's kind of going around the fact that he doesn't really like Negan. And that's the difference between Abraham and Negan. I don't want to talk about Abraham too much, but that's why I think Abraham worked so much better than Negan did. Abraham was just as funny as Negan. Like, his dialogue was just as kind of crazy. But Michael Cudlitz had that subtlety. He had that subtlety. He was never over the top. And if he was over the top, he was still fantastic. You can be over the top every now and then. You can't be over the top 90% of the time because it just makes you seem like a screaming baby. That's the problem with Negan. That's why Abraham worked so much better than Negan did, because Abraham was subtle. Michael Cudlitz's performance was subtle, and I think the dialogue was better. There's not a whole lot that Abraham says in the comics that was brought to the show. A lot of the dialogue in the show was made for the show. When dialogue is made for the show, it usually works better. When it's just grabbed from the books or from the comics or whatever it's adapted from and just taped to the show, you tend to have a bit of a falling out, and it tends to fail. It depends, you know. Sometimes dialogues work. Like the governor saying, "Kill them all." Rick saying, "We are the Walking Dead." A lot of dialogue that was great in the comics, it's great in the show. It's done a little differently, but, you know, most of Abraham's lines in the comics, they're not in the show. TV Abraham is a great entity on its own. Comic Abraham is a great entity on its own. Comic Negan was a great entity on its own. On its own. They tried to grab it, put it in the show, and it didn't work. But it does look like they have at least... I mean, Season 8 has been a mess. It's been by far the weakest season of the show. But they have improved Negan. So far, they have improved Negan. They've made him... I mean, for one thing, he's been in the show less. I think he was in like 4 episodes. Maybe 3 or 4 out of 8 episodes of the first half. So there's been less of Negan, but when Negan's been on the screen, he's been more subtle, more calm, and it might be because most of the time we've seen Negan so far has been with the Saviors. So he's talking to his buddies, with his soldiers, with people that he's cooperating with. He's not trying to go to Rick and... Well, he's trying to, but he doesn't really get a chance to go to other people and kill them and go to other communities and kill people and say really over-the-top, holy shit, like really over-the-top crap. So I think it helps when he's with the people that he's working with the Saviors, with Eugene. He was more subtle. Overall, Negan has been more subtle in Season 8. And I don't know if we're going to get more of that in the back half, if we're going to go back to just having 90% of the screen time going to Jeffrey Dean Morgan screaming and exaggerating as loud as humanly possible. I hope not. I mean, Season 8 has already been bad. So I don't know. It's possible that they've learned from their mistakes with Negan. I want to say that the damage is almost done, though. Like, they had so many episodes where Negan's already been so over the top, just screaming, exaggerating. But, I mean, hell, if they've learned their lesson, then go with it. You learn your lesson. Don't go back to 90% of him just being screaming and exaggerating and being over the top. And don't give him all of his comic dialogue. Create dialogue for Negan. It can be funny, it can be loud, but create it with the intention of having it be dialogue that goes to a character in a TV show. Don't just rip out pages from the comics and staple it to the TV show. So that's how I feel about Negan. Is he too over the top? Yes. Can it be better? Can he improve? Yes. Anyway guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't be shy, hit that like and subscribe. We're at 17 subscribers right now, so I hope that we can continue to expand our community of people. First goal is 250. Once we do 250 subscribers, I will make a celebration video just for that. Anyway, I'm Spencer Rhodes, and I will see you guys later. Bye!